Hi, I'm Clint Goss, and this is the first of 3 videos on the basics of playing the Native American flute. These videos are for people who are new to the instrument. You might be a beginner, you might be a novice, but these 3 videos together will give you all the background you need to know to really immerse yourself in this incredibly beautiful instrument. You might have a flute in your hands right now, or you might be looking to get an instrument down the line, but either way, we hope you find these 3 videos useful. The 3 native flute basic videos cover an introduction to playing the instrument, that's this video. The next video is a native flute basics video on maintaining your instrument. That looks at how flutes work and the things you need to know to keep it playing well. The last video of the series expands on playing techniques, coaches you on playing basic songs. In all of these, we try not only to provide information, but to do it in a way that's accessible to the widest audience. You might have some background in music, or you might be completely new to playing a musical instrument. It doesn't matter. The Native American flute can capture your heart, as it did mine, and it doesn't matter what your musical background is. Of course, we didn't invent all this material. It's been drawn from resources that we've seen over many years, the teachings of many people. What we've done is try to bring together the important information to get you started. These 3 native flute basics videos are part of our FluteCast series, videos on YouTube and Vimeo that span a range of playing topics. You can visit FluteCast.com for quick access to all these videos, as well as there's a wide range of freely available web resources like Flutepedia.com, which is something like 800 pages of web-based information. There's also a free 350-page book you can download. It's a PDF called The Native Flute Handbook. All of this information is freely available. Why? Because that really is the spirit of the Native American flute community. Over the years, we've seen so many examples of more experienced players freely offering advice whenever asked. This is also our way of giving back to a community that has really enriched our lives. These videos also support the idea of a flipped classroom or an inverted classroom. Vera and I lead many workshops for Native American flute players, anything from a day or 2 to a full week immersion workshop. In these settings, it's great when participants arrive at a workshop having already been exposed to some of the basic concepts and some of the techniques. So if you'd like to deepen your experience with the Native American flute, we would love to have you join us at a workshop. The Native American flutes that we play today come to us from a long, deep history of development that began evolving over 42,000 years ago. We have a pretty complex world today, but these instruments have maintained their simplicity. And that simplicity allows anyone in our culture to express themselves musically, to be creative, to have a musical voice. So let's get started playing. This instrument requires one very important skill. You know it very well already. You've been doing it all your life. Breathe. Pick up your flute, and you've got 5 or 6 finger holes here. Place your lips over some of the finger holes and just exhale into the flute. Feel your shoulders relax as you do this. Listen to the sound of your breath coming out the finger holes. Really connect with the instrument. I love to do this to start because it warms up the flute. It also warms me up. And it also connects me with anybody who might be listening. I might have an audience, I might have my flute circle, we might be at a workshop. Who's ever listening, there's a connection now between my breath, the flute, and the people who are listening. So give it a try. You can pause this video anytime, any of the exercises we're suggesting, and now we do exactly the same thing. Breathe into the breath hole at the head end of the flute. Don't worry about covering the finger holes, just hold the flute and breathe. Notice how I connect with the flute. I rest the head end of the flute on my bottom lip, and I bring the flute up and make a seal around the breath hole. Most of the time, I'm going to want a tight seal, a complete seal, but a relaxed jaw, relaxed lips, making a complete seal. It's possible to actually leak air if you want to, but most of the time, we want a complete seal. Now the job of the flute is to convert our steady breath into a steady tone. If your flute sounds something like what I just played, that's great. If it sounds something more like this, maybe something like this, your flute might need some simple adjustments, or it might even need to be assembled if it came in the mail and it was in parts. So if it doesn't sound like a nice steady tone, pause this video and go to the second video of the series. That shows you how to assemble and adjust your flute and get a nice steady tone. Our breath has energy. It has power. The job of the flute is to convert that power into vibrations. Air vibrations that we all hear as sound. And the more we do this, the more we bring our breath in sync with the flute, in sync with the vibrations, the sound that goes out. The quality of that sound reflects our emotion. That could be happy or sad or bold or soft or strident or whatever it is we feel in the moment. That's it. It's that easy. What I just did was called a one-breath solo. I inhale and play to the end of my natural breath. It's such an easy exercise. It's the basis of so many things we do on this instrument. Just hold the body of the flute, try this, your right hand, and run the fingers of your left hand over the top finger holes of the flute. Might sound something like this if you breathe at the same time. The sound we hear is actually the air inside the flute vibrating. And what I'm doing is I'm using my fingers to control the length of the flute. If I leave the flute open, it's actually a pretty short flute because all these finger holes no longer count acoustically, and the flute is only about this long. But if I close a finger hole, I'll slide just one finger down. I'm playing this game of making the flute longer, acoustically longer, and when I make it longer, the vibration has a further distance to go, and it gets a lower pitch. Also, notice what I'm doing is I slid my finger down onto the top hole, makes it very easy to find the top hole, and when I want to take it off, I'm actually rocking my finger up in just this one finger case. And that makes it easier to find a hole. If I pick my finger up, we'll do that later, but if I pick my finger up, it might make it a little bit more tough to find the finger hole, so I'm just rocking my finger up and down. So now I can use my steady breath to get the same steady sound and control the pitch with my fingers. I can do this with all three fingers. So try this. Hold the body of your flute in your right hand and cover the top three finger holes of the flute in your left hand. That's for flutes that have 5 or 6 finger holes. If you've got a flute with 5 finger holes, you'll be covering just the top 2 holes. I hold the flute in my right hand, cover those top 2 finger holes. I actually rest my third finger and my pinky on the body of the flute. And another option is you might have a flute with a leather strap. The strap actually covers a hole, so this is effectively a 5-hole flute. And again, I'm covering the top 2 holes and I'm resting my ring finger and my pinky on the body of the flute. Notice that we're suggesting that all players, whether they're left-handed or right-handed, play these instruments with the left hand on top. That's because in the long run, there are some flutes, there are a few flutes where it matters which hand you have on top, and it's feasible for most players, whether you're left or right-handed, to play with your left hand on the top holes and eventually the right hand on the bottom holes. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have any kind of a reason where it's more comfortable the other way, feel free to do that. There's no right and wrong way to play this instrument. Comfort is what's most important. So if there's a good reason, some physical reason why it's easier for you to play with the right hand on top, go for it. Okay? Whatever it is you do, cover the top holes and breathe into the flute. Can you get a steady tone like that? If it doesn't sound like that, if it sounds something more like something like that, you might have the top finger holes not completely covered. So one thing that helps maybe is to close your eyes and feel the connection that your fingers have with the edges of the finger holes of the flute. And really move your fingers around and find where they're comfortable and keep on feeling the edges of those finger holes. If you've been playing piano or guitar, piano and guitar players often play with the tips of the fingers. And so you might have the finger holes covered something like this. That's probably not going to work so well on Native American flutes. Instead, try using the pads of the fingers to get more of the surface area and you get a better seal. One thing that might help is to cradle the flutes in your hands rather than having a square grip. We call this a square grip, and then we rotate the hands up, one hand in this case, but eventually both hands, to do what we call a cradle grip. Try rotating the hands into the cradle grip with your fingers more in line with the body of the flute. This is more relaxed for most players, and it might help you get the finger holes covered better. Another thing you might do is play in front of a mirror. You might be able to see in the mirror where the finger holes are not being covered. When you do get the finger holes covered, it might sound something like this. That's a steady tone, and again I can do a one-breath solo, and I can use my breath in any way I feel like to make music on this new pitch, this new lower pitch. So if you're having trouble getting the top fingers closed cleanly, now might be a good chance to step away from the computer and get out into nature. This is a preserve a couple of miles from our house, and it's actually a site that's been used. I'll pan around here and show you. This site has been in use for 3,500 years. Indigenous peoples have come here and camped and scouted and hunted here. And maybe they even played flutes here. So we're going to use this to connect our fingers with the sound that we hear when we get the finger holes closed. I'm going to listen to the sound of the flute, and if I hear the sound that is characteristic of having a leak under the fingers, I'm going to feel those fingers, and I'm going to feel my way back to getting a clean sound and getting the finger holes closed. And this is all done with a light touch. Everything we do on this instrument, the fingers connecting with the flute, holding the flute, grasping the flute, the connection from the lips to the flute, everything's done with a light touch because there's no stress involved in this. Unless you want there to be stress. If you want your music to sound stressful for a little bit, then get stressed and grab the flute tight and then relax again. And that will be directly reflected in your music. So here we go. If you try this out in nature, there we go. If you try this out in nature, you might even connect with some of the animals, right? So. Okay, we're back in the studio now, and I'd like to look at another place you might feel stress, your thumb. If your thumb is bent at a sharp angle, you might feel stress. It might get tired pretty quickly. See if you can move it to a place where it's a slightly different position. It might be more comfortable, especially if it's a little bit straighter. The next thing we can do with the flute is we've got really 4 fingers down on the front. See if you can get the pinky down on the body of the flute as well. You certainly got the first and the third fingers down and the thumb on the back, so we've got lots of contact with the flute, lots of support. See if you can pick up this middle finger, right? See if you can pick up the middle finger, and with a steady breath, it sounds like... Right? And now we can combine it with a one-breath solo practice. Notice what I just did. I relaxed my hand for a second. We can combine it with a one-breath solo practice and play a one-breath solo, but now we've got 2 pitches to work with just by picking up that middle finger, right? One-breath solo, take a natural breath and play a phrase to the end of our natural breath as we exhale. So let's look at some more pitch possibilities. I've got the 3 top fingers closed. I have middle finger up. That's 2 pitches. I'm going to support the bottom of the flute with my other hand and pick up the top finger. So now I've got 3 fingers closed, middle finger up, and top finger up. I've got 3 pitches to work with. Might sound something like this. So it opens up a world of possibilities, right? I'm combining my fingers to get different pitches with my breath. And now I can be really expressive and really musical. Now, in a practical matter, you notice how I'm picking up my fingers. On this video, I tend to pick up my fingers fairly far off the finger holes for demonstration. That's not really how I play, okay? If you pick up your fingers a long way away, it kind of makes it difficult to find the hole again. You do get used to that after a while, but in reality, most native flute players will pick up their fingers a very small distance off the holes, make it very easy to come back and find your hole again quickly. Might sound something like this. Okay, I have switch flutes here. This is a flute that has the same notes as the first flute, but it's a good idea not to play one flute for too long in a day, right? These are wooden instruments, and they really do respond to the moisture that's in your breath. So playing a flute, it's kind of recommended not to play a flute for more than 15 minutes in a day. So I've switched flutes, same notes, but you'll see that there's a different quality to the sound. And you might be now comfortable playing the flute with the top 3 holes, right? You've got these 3 notes up here, always keeping for now this 3rd finger from the top down, but we've got 3 pitches to work with. Now add 1 more finger. Take the index finger of your lower hand and cover the next hole down. And notice I'm actually sliding this. I slid down onto the hole, and I'm using another degree of control that we have on these beautiful open hole instruments. They're open because there's no pad or key, like on a clarinet or a saxophone, to close the hole. We use our fingers to close the hole, and that gives us more freedom, more expressive freedom. I can close this bottom hole. I'm just going to play 2 notes here on this, and I'm going to close this first hole on the lower hand, the 4th hole from the top. I'm going to close it in different ways. Gives us another degree of expressive control. And now we're going to go down 1 more finger. We're going to go down and add this 5th hole from the top. We'll get all these holes closed. I'll go from the top on down. That 5-pitch scale is what we often call the major pentatonic scale. Pentatonic because it has 5 notes. If you work with these 5 pitches for a while, especially if you give them a lighter feel, maybe you include some short notes, a little bit of space, you're stopping your breath briefly, you can evoke a classical style or produce a melody that sounds Celtic. And finally, we close the bottom hole on the instrument to complete the scale of the flute. This lowest pitch is called the fundamental. The lowest pitch of any wind instrument is called the fundamental of that instrument, and it should sound something like this. If you have trouble covering that bottom hole, it might sound. And since it's the furthest away, it might be the most challenging hole to reach, especially if your flute is one of the larger lower pitch flutes. You might be reaching down a little bit more. Just be aware, try getting your fingers on the body of the flute. I'm always trying to remind myself to do that. And again, close your eyes and feel all your fingers come from the top down to the bottom pitch and see if you can get them all cleanly. This fundamental pitch, this lowest pitch on the instrument, it really makes the Native American flute distinctive from most Western traditional instruments. It's the start of another pentatonic, a 5-note scale that we call minor pentatonic. This is the most common scale you'll hear in Native American flute music today. It's a very good practice to simply go down and up these 6 notes on the flute slowly and evenly. Really enjoy the sound of the flute. It was a 1-breath solo, just using the 6 notes of the flute. Down, I usually start by going down, and then up and down. If you forget which order of fingers to use, a very convenient thing to think of is a necktie. You are unrolling a necktie down the flute. And if you were to do that, you'd cover them. And then if you roll the necktie back up again, you're picking up your fingers in order. And I'm always leaving, for now, this 3rd finger from the top closed. Now you'll notice that this flute has 4 holes at the bottom. These aren't finger holes. They're called typically tuning holes because the flute maker uses them to tune this fundamental, this all holes closed pitch of the flute. Traditionally, they were called direction holes because they signify the 4 directions. So in the next video, we'll look at how your flute works. We'll also suggest ways to maintain your flute and keep getting the best sound out of it. And of course, we would love to have you join us in person. Vera and I offer workshops throughout the year, mostly in the US, but from time to time in various places in the world. So I hope you can join us.